We would not put boots on the ground. Instead, our action would be designed to be limited in duration and scope.
Wow, Mr. President, thank you for laying out all of the options, limiting yourself, punting, and then advertising your attack plan to the enemies. I don't even know where to start, folks, with this. I'm Dan Bongino. I'll be here till 7 p.m., 888-630-9625. We've had a great show so far. We've had some great guests. We had Bill Kristol, we had Eli Lake, Chris Plant, Major General Bob Scales, and now we have my friend KT McFarland, who I just saw on live TV. And did you run out of the studio and just jam the cell phone in your ear, KT?
Dan, I would do anything to be on with you.
You're the best. Well, I think the last time we spoke, we were doing a piece on Hannity on the NSA, and we came to some agreement there in the end, which I always appreciate. So you are the Fox News national security analyst, and the host of FoxNews.com's DEFCON 3 show, 1 p.m. on Wednesdays at FoxNews.com. Thank you so much. I can only imagine your bat phone is ringing off the hook as well today.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
Starting out with that clip we had, and I'll just sum it up for you. The president says, well, we will not put boots on the ground. Instead, our action will be designed to be limited in duration and scope. KT, I mean, is he not advertising now? First, he didn't make a decision. He punted to Congress. Secondly, he's already limiting his options. And third, is he not advertising the attack plan? I mean, where am I going wrong here?
This is totally amateur hour. And the tragedy is every administration I've been part of, when a president acts, he's got a lot of different audiences. He's got the U.S. domestic audience. He's got the international audience. And in this case, I think Obama decided he had a get-out-of-jail-free card, and he's going to punt to Congress and let Congress make the decision. The president, between saying 2 years ago, Assad's got to go, and saying a year ago there's a red line for Assad's chemical weapons, and then Assad calling his bluff in both cases, the president was sort of stuck out there on the limb of having to take some kind of military action, even though his military were telling him, look, it's going to be tough. You're not going to be successful. You don't want to put boots on the ground. That'll be a long, prolonged third Middle East war that you don't want to get into. And any kind of limited strike will probably neither deter nor punish Assad, which is what President Obama's goals were. So I think the president was sort of casting about thinking, yikes, how do I get out of this mess? And because the British Parliament voted to not support any kind of British military action, I think President Obama thought, right, that's what I'll do. I'll turn it over to Congress, knowing that Congress is probably going to say no. And then President Obama can say, well, I wanted to. I have the moral high ground. Congress wouldn't let me. And that may get him out of jail free in the U.S. domestic sense, and it may get him out of a war that he probably was going to go into and not be successul. The problem is he just looks like he's all sound and flurry and nothing to back it up. It's one thing when you make a threat and then carry it out, but it's quite another if you make a threat and don't.
All right, we're talking to KT McFarland, Fox News national security analyst. KT, do we run the risk here with the Russians, I think, clearly thinking the president right now is a laughingstock? I mean, he's embarrassed himself from the reset button on, which wasn't even reset in Russian. God knows what it says, what it said in Russian at that point. But thinking he's not the most credible with his word and his foreign policy, do we run the risk here, and I posed this to General Bob Scales before, of a proxy war here with the Russians, given that we already know they're supplying the Syrian regime with heavy weapons, surface to ship missiles, surface to air missiles. Do we run this risk? I mean, clearly Putin has no respect for the president.
That's right. Let me just give you an example of how the president and Putin get along. They were at a G8 summit earlier in the summer, and both Putin and Obama wanted to use the same gym in Dublin. Apparently there's only one good gym in Dublin. And so they couldn't share. So it was going to be one or the other, and somehow President Obama got dibs on the gym. So there's no place for Putin to work out. So Putin, not to be outsmarted or outdone, decides he's going to one-up Obama. And so he goes to the press corps and says, follow me. They went to a icy Dublin lake. Putin jumps in and does the breaststroke, complete with photographers snapping away, and gets on the front page of the paper. That's how Putin plays Obama. And so I think what's going to happen next week, in fact on Tuesday, I think, President Obama goes to Putin's home. He goes to St. Petersburg, and he's then going to be sort of dissed again.
Yeah, and I noticed, having done a lot of these advances overseas, did you ever notice when there's they're in a joint picture together that President Obama and President Putin are always sitting down because Obama is significantly taller than Putin. And that's another thing, folks. Like behind the scenes, these are all big negotiations all the time. The Russians always win. Like they're never standing up because Putin doesn't want to be embarrassed. And yeah, he's playing us. He's always got the the bare-chested photos and the judo throws going there.
But Dan, here's your point, which I think is a really significant one about Syria. Syria is a proxy fight. Syria is a proxy fight, and I think it's a harbinger of a generation of fighting in the Middle East, where on one side are lining up the radical Sunnis and the other the radical Shiites. So the Shiites are Iran, Hezbollah, Assad. On the other side of the divide are the al-Qaeda terrorists supported by Qatar, by the wealthy Gulf Arab oil states. And they look at Syria as a proxy fight and a fight to the finish, not one that's going to end in a negotiated solution. And for the United States, I'm not sure we really belong in the middle of that fight. To me, I look at the Middle East and say, what are our strategic interests in the Middle East? It's Israel and oil and terrorists. We want to make sure Israel survives. We want to make sure terrorists stay in the Middle East and don't come to our shores, and we want their oil. But as long as we don't need their oil, if we develop American domestic oil and we become energy independent and self-sufficient, then I don't think we need to be in the middle of that civil war that's going to go on throughout the Arab world for the next generation.
Well, KT, I agree with you 100%. KT McFarland, a Fox News national security analyst. I think with this war fatigue setting in, and I've been asking all of our guests today, and I don't think you can question, it's almost bipartisan on all levels of the political spectrum, from far left liberal to Tea Party conservative. People are really starting to question what you just said. What in the end is the real legitimate meat and potatoes national security interest of the United States? No one's questioning, including you, that this is a humanitarian disaster.
Oh, for sure, and give them all sorts of humanitarian assistance.
Oh, of course, and I don't see any problem with that. We are the most generous, benevolent country on earth. But my question to you here is, we've had some interesting answers on this one. Bill Kristol seems to think that Congress is going to respond after deliberating on it, that they will authorize this action. Major General Scales seem to think no chance. I seem to think there's no chance of that either. They're not in session now. Their constituents are tired of this. How do you think Congress responds?
I think what's happening is that the American military and intelligence communities do not think this is a good idea. That military force in Syria, what are the goals? What is the mission? What are we trying to accomplish by the use of military force? It's been very vague. Are we trying to punish them and deter them? Well, punish them. By the time we get around to it, if we do get around to it, all those weapon systems will have been moved. We'll be bombing empty warehouses. Secondly, if we're going to deter them, what if we're not deterring them? What if Assad says, well, it was a little bit of a punishment, but I can absorb that. I'm just going to go on my merry way. I'm going to use chemical weapons again. Then Obama's in a position like LBJ was during Vietnam. Is he going to escalate? Nobody wants this war. Maybe the only people who think it would be a successful war are the Bush neocons and the Obama interventionists. But the U.S. military, General Dempsey, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, got about as blunt as you can get when he sent a letter to Congress saying there are a lot of problems with arming the rebels. There are a lot of problems with a limited military strike. There are a lot of problems. It would not be a cakewalk for the United States, in effect, to go to war with Syria. So I think that when time goes on, when the ardor of the moment passes, when the headlines pass and the world moves on, by September we're going to be in the middle of anniversary of September 11th coverage. We're not even going to be thinking that much about the tragedies of Syria. So I think at the end of the day, it probably isn't going to happen. If anything happens, Obama will just lob a couple of missiles off into the desert.
Well, KT, thank you so much for your time. I can only imagine, again, your cell phone minutes are going to explode today. Thank you so much. By the way, I love the suit on Fox. I watched you on live TV. It was great. We'll talk to you soon.
I'm going to come to you all the time for my fashion statements.
It was great. It was great. So I thought I had you on an earlier segment. I ran in and said, how do we have KT? She's on Fox right now. So thank you so much. It was an honor. Great perspective.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks, that was KT McFarland. She'll be on Fox all day as well. We got some great guests coming up for you, folks, so stay tuned, 888-630-9625.